In making a straight dress, which can also be called a gown, I have my bodice pattern drafted here already. So here is the back panel and this is for the front panel. So you can draft any design of a bodice pattern for yourself. Here is a design I made for myself. So you can see what I have here. For my back panel, I have a square neckline. And for my front panel, I have a round neckline. Okay. On this pattern, which is the front panel, I made use of a slash and spread method of dart manipulation. As you can see, I have my darts on the center front neckline. So you can see what I have here. I added a dart by the side, which is the French dart. I close the dart I have on the waistline. I close the dart I have on the French seam, and I open the two darts on the center front neckline. Also, I picked a dart on the empire level. So this is the front panel of my bodice pattern. I can decide to grade this as a whole, just as a single piece as I have it to make a dress, or slash this into pieces. So that is exactly what I will be doing. I want my pattern to be in two pieces, so which means I will open up my dart line in order to have this as two pieces. But if you want to have yours as a single piece, you can leave it like so. Now I will be cutting my front panel into two. If you want to slash your back panel as well, you can as well open up your darts, cut out your darts, then separate your patterns in two places. So but as for me, I want my back panel to be a single piece, and I will be having two pieces for my front panel. As the center front, and I have this as the side, and this is the dart area. Okay guys, after having my patterns the exact way I want it, the next step is to start grading this to make a dress. In grading a bodice pattern to make a dress pattern, I will start with the back panel. So on my back panel, I have my seam allowances all around my pattern. So I'm putting my front panel aside. So here is my back panel. I have my seam allowance on the shoulder line, I have on the neckline, I have on the armhole, I have by the side seam, and I have at the center back, which is a zipper allowance. Okay, and I added half of an inch of seam allowance on the waistline as well, which I've trimmed off. So which means if you have a seam allowance on your bodice pattern on the waist area, you have to trim this off because it is not needed. So on my fresh pattern paper, I have my border line drawn out, so which is going to be my starting point. Okay, and this side is my center back. So this is a center back line. So I will position my pattern like so. So the HPS must be on my starting point line. Then I will tape my bodice pattern together with my fresh pattern paper. Okay guys, now I have my bodice pattern taped together with my fresh pattern paper, and this is what I have. In constructing a dress, this can be achieved in two ways. The first way is having your upper part separately and having the lower part separately. If I want to make a two pieces dress, I will have my upper part as a single pattern, which is going to be a standalone pattern, just the way I have it here. So my bodice pattern is going to be the upper part of my pattern, is going to be a standalone. Then I will draft another pattern, which is going to be the lower part, that is the skirt pattern. So after cutting the two pieces out on my fabrics, then I will join the pieces together. So which means I will have a joining on the waist area of my dress. Another way of making a dress is having the dress pattern as a single piece. So which means there's not going to be a joining on the waist area. When making a dress, you can either have a joining on the waist area or you have a joining on the knee area. It all depends on the type of style you are constructing. But in this case, I want to show you how to make a dress without joining at all. No joining on the waist area or on the knee area. Mind you, some styles requires having a joining on the knee area, which we have to make a dress to the knee area, which is going to be like a straight dress. Then from the knee area downward to the desired skirt length is going to be a flare. That case is different. But in this case, I want to show you how to make a dress without any joining. So now I have my bodice pattern on a fresh pattern paper, and this is the center back. So here is the center back part with my zipper allowance. Okay, and here is the waistline. On the zipper allowance line, I removed the zipper bulge. Okay, and in adding to this, I will subtract 1 inch away from the length of my pattern on the zipper allowance side. So I will take this up by 1 inch, and I will connect this to the side. So this will help to eradicate zipper bulge completely. Okay, then I will trim this off. Okay, now I have the lower part trimmed off. That is the 1 inch I measured upward. So the next step is to insert the remaining vertical measurement to make this a complete dress. And I will start with the hip level. So guys, you need to take note of this. Every measurement that has to do with the lower part of the body has to be taken from the waistline. So for this reason, I will be inserting my vertical measurement from the waistline. And I will start with the hip level. The measurement I'm working with is 9 inches for the hip level. That is from the waist to hip. And I will have to take the measurement on both sides purposely because the shape I have by this side is different from the shape I have from the center back. So on the center back point, I will insert the same 9 inches for the hip level. So with this, I will not have my line on a straight line. So this is not going to be a perfect straight line. Okay, so after taking the hip measurements, then I will insert the knee measurement. The measurement I'm working with for the knee length is 23 inches. Okay, so from 23 inches I will subtract 3 inches. So I will use 2 inches as the knee length measurement. Whatever the knee length measurement you are working with is, make sure you subtract up to 2 to 3 inches away from the measurement. Okay guys, now I have my lines drawn out. Here is the waistline, this is the hip level, this is the knee level, this is the dress length, and this is the hem allowance line. Then on the center back, I extended the center back line downward to the hem allowance point, which is here. In order to have a perfect straight line for your center back line, okay, all you need to do is to take the measurement you have from the center back points on your pattern to the edges of the pattern paper. Okay, as for me, here is my center back line, and what I have from this point to this edge is my zipper allowance. So I took the measurements from the center back line, not from the zipper allowance line, purposely because my zipper allowance has been shaped, so it is no more on a straight line. So I took the measurements from the center back line to the edges of my pattern paper, which I have 12.5 inches. Okay, then I took the 12.5 inches from the edges of my pattern paper to the side. Then I continue taking the measurements like so. Then I connected the dotted lines together in order to have a straight line. So that was how I arrived at my center back line, so which I extended downward to the hem allowance line. Also, by the side of my pattern, here is the side of my pattern, I draw out a straight line as well. Also, by the side of my pattern, I drew out a straight line as well, which is going to be a guide for me in constructing the side seam. So for this, I measured 1 inch from the edges of my pattern forward, like so, downward, and I connected the dotted lines together. So, which means for the side of my pattern, this line is the starting point. Then for the center back of my pattern, this line is the center back. So now that I have all this done, the next step is to insert my horizontal measurement. On my pattern, I have my horizontal measurement inserted to the waist point because I have this drafted already. So now I will have to insert my horizontal measurement for the hip level, for the knee level, and for the dress length. Now I will start with the hip measurement. On the hip level, I will insert the hip circumference measurements I'm working with. The hip circumference measurements I'm working with is 44 inches. 44 divided by 4 gives me 11 inches. So, and because this is a center back, I will start taking the measurement from the center back. So from here, I will insert 11 inches. And I have it here. And because this is a straight dress, I need an ease around the hip level, which will allow the dress to be able to move downward to the dress length. So for this reason, I will be adding half of an inch as the ease allowance. This also depends on the type of fabrics you are using. If you are making use of 100% cotton material, you need up to half of an inch as your ease allowance. If your fabrics is not 100% cotton, that is, it is stretchy a little, then you can add 1/4 of an inch. But if you are making use of a very stretchy fabrics, you don't need any ease at all. So which means this is no more my hip point. So this point is my hip point. Okay, so the next step is to connect the hip point to the waist point. And I will be connecting this using my hip curve ruler. Now I will be connecting the hip and the waist point together using my hip curve ruler, purposely because the hip area is not meant to be on a straight line. Please take note of this. If you are drafting your pattern for a curvy person, you can use up to 7 to 10 inches on your curve ruler. But if the person is not curvy, make sure you do not use much curvy parts of your curve ruler in order not to have unnecessary excess around the hip area. Okay, so when you are connecting the waist to the hip, make sure you have a smooth connection. You can see it is not obvious I connected the 2 points separately. Can you see the connection I have from here to this point already? And I picked this from the waistline downward to the hip area. So you can see this part is curvy while I have this on a straight line. So I will clean up the straight line like so that you can see the effect of the curve ruler. Okay guys, now that I've connected from hip to the waist level, the next step is to connect from the hip downwards to the dress length. Okay, so the measurement I will be inserting on the dress length is a hip circumference measurement I'm working with. I don't need to insert any measurement on the knee level. After connecting to the hip level, the next step is to connect to the dress length. So on the dress length, I will insert 1/4 of the hip circumference measurement I'm working with, which is 11 inches. So from the center back line, I will insert 11 inches. Which is here. Okay, now if you want to have your dress as a perfect straight dress, all you need to do is to connect from the hip level downward on a straight line. So you can see the straight line I have here already. Can you see this? So you will maintain the exact measurement you have on the hip level, which is 11.5 inches plus ease allowance. Can you see? Then you will have to insert the same 11.5 inches on the dress length. Okay, so with this you will have the lower part of your dress on a perfect straight line. But when you are doing this, let me give you a clue in order not to have an issue around the hip area. So when you are connecting on a straight line, make sure your straight line does not get to the hip level. So you will have to stop about 1/4 of an inch below the hip level. So let's assume I'm stopping here. So I'll clean up this part. Okay, then the connection from the waist to the hip also will not get to the hip point. So I will make this stop as well about 1/4 of an inch above the hip level. Then I will reconnect the 2 points together with my hip curve roller. So with this I will have a very smooth connection around the hip area, like so. Can you see what I have there? So with this, the connection of my dress by the side goes from the waistline downward, and I have it on a perfect straight line downward to the dress length. But if you don't want to have your dress on a perfect straight line, that is, you don't want to have a perfect straight dress, you can as well make this a pencil dress. So which means the lower part of your skirt will be narrower than what you have on the hip level. So in this case, that is when you need to make use of the 1/4 of your hip circumference measurement. So for me, 1/4 of the hip circumference measurement I'm working with is 11 inches, which I marked here. Then I will be subtracting about 1 to 2 inches away from the hip circumference measurement. So this also depends on the type of fabrics you are using. If your fabric is a little bit stretchy, you can make this 2 to 2.5 inches or even 3 inches. And if your fabric is very stretchy, you can make use of 3 inches to 3.5 inches. But if you are making use of 100% cotton material, you cannot use above 2 inches. You can use below 2 inches or exactly 2 inches, as this also depends on the wearer. Okay, so as for me, I will be making use of 1.5 inches. So from the 1/4 of the hip circumference measurement I'm working with, which I circled here, I will measure 1.5 inches forward. So this is 1 inch, so this is 1.5 inches point. Then I will connect from the 1.5 inches point upward to the hip level point. I can connect to the hip level point purposely because the line is not going to be on a straight line. So this is the real hip measurement I'm working with. This is a hip circumference measurement point, and this is a his of 1/2 of an inch. Here is a point. Don't forget, I've reconstructed this part for you guys if you are making a straight dress. So for this reason, I'm not using this point, I'm using the exact measurement point, so which I have here, and I will connect to the 1.5 inches point. If you are subtracting 2 inches, you will connect to the 2 inches point.